This week in IT, Microsoft slips new features into the April cumulative update for Windows 11. Iran is coming after your hybrid cloud environments. The Outlook for Windows preview now gets Gmail account support, and much more. So let's start with the cumulative update for Windows 11. Of course, Patch Tuesday has just gone, and as usual, Microsoft releases a cumulative update that includes all the security patches that have been tested over the last few weeks, and it seems some new features in Windows 11. One of the biggest new features is the inclusion of the Lapse tool natively into the operating system. And actually, this isn't just for Windows 11, it's also for Windows 10, and this is coming into just the Pro and Enterprise versions. This doesn't come to Home. Now, this tool has been around for a long time, and it's really aimed at helping enterprises make sure that every device on their network has a unique administrator password. Now the tool is all new and improved, lots of new features here, and it's built into Windows. So that's great news for everybody. But the Azure Active Directory part of the tool is still in private preview. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the new features here that come to the Active Directory part for Windows Server. So there was always some concern about password encryption, that these passwords were not encrypted at rest in Active Directory. Microsoft always said, well, that's not really a problem. Once you've compromised Active Directory, it's already game over anyway. But, to kind of allay those fears, Microsoft has added password encryption to this new version of the tool. Now, there are several new features, but I just want to pick out some of the ones that stand out. There's also the ability to manage the Directory Services Restore Mode password. So not only is Microsoft now going to allow you to manage that with Lapse, it's also going to automatically rotate that password for you on a regular basis. And while I'm on the subject of automatic password rotation, Microsoft includes that now in this tool for the local administrator password on your endpoints. And that is huge, I think, the fact that this password is going to be automatically rotated, and that provides an extra level of protection. So that is part of the April cumulative update for Windows 10, Windows 11. So if you haven't been using Lapse, partly because mainly you have to find some way to roll it out to your machines to actually deploy it, now there are less and less excuses not to get a grip on the local admin password situation on your endpoints. So there are some other minor new features in this update, one of them being notifications are now enabled on the start menu for Microsoft accounts. So you might get a notification, saying you're running out of storage space in OneDrive, or that you should back up your files like your documents or your kind of known folders on the device if that's not configured. And one other minor thing here, Microsoft is saying that the search box on the taskbar will now be lighter if you set Windows to some kind of custom color mode. Oh, and one thing that I forgot to mention, apparently there's a whole load of Microsoft Defender for endpoint improvements coming in this update as well. So Microsoft announced this week that the session catalog for its Build conference in May is now live. So you can head over to the Build website, and if you've already registered for the conference, or even if you haven't, you can start selecting your sessions and planning out what you want to see if you're a developer. Now, the conference runs in Seattle, May 23rd to 24th, and you can attend in person. This is an in-person event, but it's also going to be available online. So it's Microsoft doing this hybrid thing that they've been doing since last year. So you've got all the usual stuff. Satya Nadella's given the keynote. There's all sorts of sessions, live workshops, labs, demos, all sorts of things there that you can go and attend. Microsoft says that this is going to be an event where you can connect with the experts. Now, I don't know how that works if you're going to attend the conference virtually, but I've signed up and I'm really interested to see how this whole experience works if you're going to attend remotely. So if you have a hybrid cloud environment, so one where you have your on-premises Active Directory connected to Azure Active Directory using Azure AD Connect, Microsoft has warned this week that an Iranian state-backed group, which is dubbed Mercury, is attacking organizations and is able to access Azure Active Directory and literally wipe out everything that you have there. So this is pretty serious. Now, of course, as usual, these attacks are pretty complex. I'm not going to go through every single step of how this works. So basically this group is using a tool called Azure AD Eternals to compromise the account that the Azure AD Connect software is using on a domain controller. And then along with an RDP exploit that they're using to compromise an administrator account, they're able to get access to Azure Active Directory. They can wipe out virtual machines, entire server farms, and do all sorts of things that you really would not want to happen, of course. Now, Microsoft is giving some advice about what you can do to mitigate this attack. The first thing you should do is make sure that you review the global admin permissions in your Azure Active Directory tenant to make sure that you're carefully controlling the number of global admin accounts and who has access to them, and to make sure that they're separated from accounts that might be synchronized from Windows Server Active Directory. And of course, there are all sorts of features that you should be using to secure your identities in Azure Active Directory, like conditional access policies. So make sure that people are logging on from trusted IP addresses in trusted locations, not Iran, of course, and that the devices are compliant with various security regulations before they're allowed to log in. There are also other things like continuous access evaluation, which means that Azure AD is looking at that account on a continuous basis, not just issuing it a token and then waiting until that token expires before it makes security checks again. And that you have tamper protection set up in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and that you're continuously monitoring that device where the Azure AD Connect software is installed. Okay, Outlook for Windows. Now, this is really confusing, I think, for everybody. There are so many different versions of Outlook. You've got Outlook for the web, you've got the desktop client that you can download today as part of the Microsoft 365 apps. You've got the Mail app that's built into Windows 10 and Windows 11. But yes, Microsoft, if you're not aware, is working on a new unified Outlook client that going forward should replace all these different versions of Outlook. Much like it's doing with Teams at the moment, it's based on Microsoft's WebView 2 technology that comes from its Edge browser and the Chromium project. So Microsoft has added Gmail support, so you can add your Gmail accounts into Outlook for Windows if you're currently using the preview version. And Microsoft is also going to add support for, Apple email and other email account systems via IMAP. Microsoft Edge workspaces are now also in a limited public preview. They were in a limited private enterprise preview. I think before this all gets really complicated again with the naming of these things from Microsoft. And now this was first announced, I think it was back in November at Ignite 2022. And basically what this does is provide a tab group in Edge that you can share with your colleagues or your family and friends in the case of this new preview. And I think they're saying that you can invite up to 5 or 10 other people, but you do have to apply to be on it. It's not just enabled by default, and you have to be running a specific version of Edge. So version 111 or 112, I think, has been released since this announcement was made. So what it really does is just allow you to share a series of links in the form of browser tabs with a particular set of people. So, it's just really aimed at allowing you to keep track of a set of links that are required for you to complete, a particular project or, something that you're working on with your family or friends, so that you can just keep them all in one place. And guess what? We're not done with the Azure security flaws this week. It hasn't been good news for Azure in the last week with security. So a newly discovered kind of by design flaw has been uncovered in Azure storage accounts. What you should know by default is that when you create a storage account in Azure, they're assigned 2 shared authentication keys by default. So these are just very long strings that you need to know in order to be able to access that storage account remotely. Now, of course, that makes it really convenient to access the storage account. You can probably disable this default configuration, and you can configure identity-based access to the storage account. So you have to enter a username and password, and obviously you decide then who gets access to the storage account. But they have to authenticate as a user and, say, hi, this is me, authenticate before they get access to your storage. Now, what's happening here, as I understand, is that attackers are able to use features within Azure Functions and discover those shared storage keys for a storage account, and then get access to the account and, of course, do whatever the hell they want. And guess what? Microsoft says that they're moving away from this default configuration of shared authentication keys and advising that you should move to an identity-based authentication for storage, at least where it's connected to Azure Functions. So if you want more details about all of that, of course, you can find it on petri.com. While we're on the subject of security, this week, April 12th, so by the time you're seeing this video, it might already be a bit late to attend the live event, but you can also access it on demand. We're hosting a webinar with the VP of Security Research for Netrix, Dirk Schrader, where he'll be covering system hardening and file integrity monitoring to block cyber threats on Windows devices. So if you're responsible for securing Windows servers or endpoints in your environment, this is a really critical webinar that could help you improve security in your organization. So Dirk will be covering things like using best practice benchmarks to secure and harden the devices across your organization, tuning security baselines to meet your needs and risk tolerance, monitoring file activity while reducing fatigue alert, promptly remediating configuration drift, and how to maintain and prove regulatory compliance. So most compliance regulations require some kind of system hardening and file integrity monitoring by default. So this webinar is essential for any organization that not only wants to just improve their security posture, but also needs to meet various security regulations and just prevent business disruptions. So I'll leave a link in the show notes below. Please do register for that webinar. It's going to be really interesting. I'm going to leave another video on the screen now about the new preview version of Microsoft Teams 2.0. So if you'd like to learn more about that, then do check out that video. And if you found the video useful, then please give it a like. That's it from me for this week, and I'll see you next time.